I'm going to put my interpretation on this.
Yeah,
It is that I think the diets are stressful.
they're stressful.
Yeah, and obviously, just think about it. Someone takes away half your food. This is
Yeah,
stressful.
yeah,
The diets are stressful. Stress has some benefits. Stress has some downsides,
yeah.
like our
You want some stress, but not too much.
yeah. So the animals that better tolerate the stress, they lose less weight.
Which
You
makes
know,
sense. Yeah.
yeah. And the animals that are more sensitive to the stress, they're going to lose weight. I think weight loss is a really good indicator of stress in a mouse.
Hmm.
When they're stressed, they're going to lose weight. They burn more energy. And so I think that animals coming into a diet group that are already intrinsically more resilient deal with the stress of the diet better and they
Hmm.
gain the most benefit.
Hmm.
And the animals that come into the diet and they're already maybe not that robust are going to be hit harder by the diet. They're going to lose weight and they're naturally going to have a shorter lifespan.
Hmm.
So,
Did you
uh,
have any way to measure something like stress resilience by other means?
measuring stress resilience is a big open question for the field. You can imagine that there are some ethical considerations. We're very serious about how we handle animals, and
Hmm.
of course, we want to avoid stressing animals. The way we measured stress resilience was actually after the fact. During their lifespans, I told you how much phenotyping, how much measurement we made on these animals.
Hmm.
There was a period once a year where they spent a whole month in the facility where we did all these procedures where we weighed them and put them in
Hmm.
the NMR machine and put
Yeah.
them in all the
You have to
cages.
pick them up. You have to disturb them. It's
Yeah.
stressful.
And part of that, I think the biggest stressor for them is to be separated from their cage mates
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
when they're isolated, they're looking for their cage mates. They know something's disrupted. They're not in their home cage. And what we noticed is during that month, almost all mice lost weight.
Mm.
No surprise, it's stressful.
Yep.
So I thought, well, how much weight did they lose? And so we went through and we weigh them all the time. We weigh them at least once a week. So we went through and we blocked off that month from beginning to end and measured how much weight did they lose.
Hmm.
What we found is that the more weight they lost, the shorter their lifespan would be. And this was true within every diet group. And
Ah.
again, like I was saying before, I think this is a measure of how resilient the animals are to stress.
Yeah. So the idea
Mhm.
here is what's nice about this is you're finding something that cuts across all of the conditions. So within every condition, the mice might have access to food at all times. They might have 40% of their calories taken away. They might be on this intermittent fasting schedule for 1 or 2 days. Within each group, when you do this month of testing, you could measure how much weight they lost, and they would all lose weight because that's stressful and it just results in weight loss. But you're saying the ones that lost the least weight, which implies that they're probably more stress resilient, tended to live longer no matter what the feeding condition was.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I
And
love it.
it sort of really does kind of start to twist and change a little bit how you think about things like dietary restriction as it's not merely changing the pattern of food that an animal eats. It is a form of stress that must be dealt with by the organism.
Mhm. Agreed. And stressors can have beneficial effects because in you think of a mild stressor is enough to stimulate your body's homeostatic response. Your
Mm-hmm.
body will respond to a stress by bringing compensatory mechanisms on board. And if you stress an animal severely, you're going to do damage to them, and that's not good. So we avoid that. But if you stress them a little bit, they and I can't prove this with the experiment that we did. We're going to do some more. But I think the diets could potentially also trigger these homeostatic responses and induce more resilience than background,
Hmm.
if that
Hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah. And so one of the things that you found as sort of like an overarching thing is like figure 3, for example, it's titled Health and Metabolic Traits Change with Age and Diet, but are poor predictors of lifespan. So you guys measured all sorts of stuff: cardiac output, grip strength, prevalence of tumors, just wheel running activity, all sorts of stuff. And you found that many of these things were changed by diet and did change across the lifespan, which were unsurprising, and yet they poorly predicted lifespan. Can you give us some examples there, and maybe sort of what sort of the overarching result was in your view?
Um, yeah, cardiac output. I forget which way it goes. Let's see if I have actually have figure 3 somewhere.
Um,
Did we look at?
yeah, I've also got it right here.
I can't even read this thing. I poured over every word for so long. I can't even do it. Um, what did we put on there? Oh, fasting glucose, body
Yeah.
temperature, and frailty. Hmm. I lost the question. Sorry,
Okay,
guy.
hold on. Let me pull this up here. So you measured basically you measured a bunch of health and metabolic traits.
We did.
And some of these change with age, as you would expect. Animals get more frail with age. You expect something like grip strength to go down with age, I imagine. But nonetheless, even though they changed as a result of the dietary interventions, even though they changed across the lifespan, they were often poor predictors of lifespan.
Right. Let's go back to the arrows. And if we think of it
Yeah,
as the diet is causing changes in these traits,
yeah,
so the diet has an arrow that points to cardiac output. It has an arrow that points to grip strength, and it affects these things, but there's no arrow from grip strength to lifespan. There's no arrow
yeah, yeah,
from surprisingly cardiac output to lifespan. So the diet has lots of other effects that are not intermediates for lifespan.
yeah, yeah.
It's
Yeah, and
hard.
they appear not to be intermediates, even though many people would have expected them to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, improving metabolic health is a good thing, especially for people.
Hmm.
Improving cardiac output, it's a good thing. So it's do you want to live as long as you possibly can, or do you want to be healthy while you're alive? And I
Hmm.
think some of these effects are definitely in the healthy direction. They're beneficial and they're good, and they don't necessarily extend lifespan. So we shouldn't equate good health with long lifespan.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a punchline.
Hmm. Were there any things that looked like were there any things that were clearly associated with longer lifespan that you would interpret as being like less healthy or less desirable to have if one is alive?
Oh, absolutely, the weight loss.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, I think that's the big one.
yeah, just losing all of that mass, including that lean mass.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, so again, we don't want to anthropomorphize, but give us a sense. So remind us again how much. So like in the 20 or 40% calorie restriction group, that's quite a severe restriction. Remind us how much fat and how much lean mass was lost there. Quite a bit.
Oh, that is a good. They were about half the size that
Yeah,
they would be on an ad lib diet.
yeah, yeah. So
So
in a human being, that would be that's
that
imagine
would
being I
be
don't know roughly half as big as you would have been.
yes, and not desirable. Just put
Yeah,
it that
yeah.
way.
And do you think so? So things like that in these conditions, we mentioned this before, under these conditions, these things are associated with longer lifespan, but it's very easy to imagine that such a mouse living out in the real world outside of assisted living, those things would actually be a huge liability.